Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Aspen City Council work session for October 28th, 2024. This being budget season as it is, we have a full budget agenda this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Al, Budget Manager. Just to start, our additional follow-ups from last week's meeting, you can see listed on the slide the departments that presented. We did bring a couple follow-ups, but just to see if there was anything not previously discussed.
Did you have another slide on that?
We do have two follow-up items.
Yeah, the other things
Yes.
that were included in, yeah. So council, again, just looking at a recap of 1021. There's a couple items that were brought forward for staff action or council request for information. If there's anything missing here, please try to bring it up now. Just at this time, I'll remind you of what I was reminded of, which is that the budget process, the budget can be adopted by resolution, which is one hearing. It is not a two-hearing process. It will be a resolution with a public hearing is the plan. So we want to go into that meeting, which is on the 12th?
Correct.
On the 12th, with as much information, questions answered as possible.
And then the second follow-up item with a little more detail from last week when CJ presented was on the single-use bag program. And just to provide a little more detail on that, the $50,000 that's roughly equal to the revenue that comes into that program is equal to creating reusable bags out of former banners, e-waste collection events, and other e-recycling and recycling-related events. The remainder of the operating budget in that is just share of personnel allocated to that program.
And a quick question about this. The city of Aspen instituted a bag fee program a decade ago or something like that. And then the state put in, so are we doing single-use bag fee collections because of the state program at this time?
The state is doing them. I think the state is we fall under the state's kind of purview on this now. We left our bag fee at what the fee had been set at previously. To not walk it back, the state has a slightly lower, and we left our fee where it was at 20 cents a bag, and the city went down to 10. So we have to collect because we fall under the state. We couldn't exempt ourselves from it if we wanted to. It'd be an interesting change of strategy. I think this is in place because of the way it was originated here.
And then, does that mean that 10 cents gets remitted to the state and that we keep 10 cents?
That doesn't. No, we keep them, I believe, is Matt?
That is a good question, and I can follow up that.
I believe we keep still the full amount of that bag fee.
And then, one of my questions about the program itself, various bags. Under the state program, are all bags charge that fee, and do we have any local control over that? For example, small bags, I think they used to be called candy bags, or bottle sleeve bags, and things like that. Are all those under the purview of the state program, and do we have any local control over the application of that stuff?
There is some local control over that. It's trying to think of like some of the exceptions, like the bag that you would get at the liquor store, for example, like a bottle bag, those sorts of things can be exempted, I believe. There's some exceptions in there for all local retailers that don't have to do this because they're a small enough size that they don't fall under the state's bag fee program. We can elect to include them or not include them at our discretion.
Sometimes you get prescription medications, and those are in a small bag as well. Was medical left out of this? Okay,
Yep.
so those are exempted.
Those types of things, absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
So our bag fee was just for the two grocery stores. Now, what is the state, have they, so it's all retail or
It's a significant bigger chunk of retailers, so chain retailer outlets in the state of Colorado, which captures a lot, and still there's, you know, kind of single shop or two shop in the state that doesn't necessarily apply to. We have found that a lot of those folks are actually kind of pushing acid and, you know, sorts of things in town as well, just to sort of comply with what the community desire was for that.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you for info.
Absolutely.
And then I have an update on food tax refund. It was budget oversight when we were creating the proposed 2025 budget. I grew it at CPI off of the 2024 amount rather than the presented and council approved 132 per person. So there will be an adjustment from proposed budget to the kind of final revised that we bring forward for adoption. And the net impact is an additional 118,500 spread across parks, transportation, housing, and Kids First.
Matt, why does it impact those 4 different funds?
Because they receive dedicated share of sales tax, and the refunds come out of their funds because of that.
Thank you.
All right, just if there's no additional questions from last week, we will step forward. Tonight we have employee housing, employee benefits, tourism, public education, information technology, Kids First, and debt service, as well as our wrap-up.
So council members, Pete Strecker, Finance Director, here to just talk about the Employee Housing Fund. Just a reminder, the city does operate its own housing program. We basically are focused on stability and on quality and quick response times and essential services to the community through this program. We currently have 74 units in our inventory. To date, the program has predominantly focused on kind of acquisition of properties, but we do have a smaller program called the Down Payment Assistance Program, where we also help employees if they want to get into an APSHA unit and they need some financial assistance on their loan. We provide up to $30,000 on a loan process only for those types of deed restricted properties at this time, and it has a 15-year payback requirement on it. So that is just one small program. To date, we've run 11 loans out of that program. 5 of them have already completed and have been retired, and the other 6 are currently active. It's about $100,000 still outstanding on that. So the program is predominantly funded from internal transfers, as you can see here. The remainder of funds are just related to rental activity. We basically have ownership units that we sell to employees that have to sell back when they leave the city. And we also have a pool of rental units that would then have rental income and utilities paid back to the city. On the expenditure side, you can see that the annual expenses typically are around kind of maintenance and capital needs, capital improvements. And then there is a large ask in the 2025 column that I'll talk about on the next slide. That's included in the Employee Housing Assistance Program. Otherwise, the rest of that line is just for that small loan program that we run. And you can see that the fund balance is currently pegged to kind of grow over time, and that's really intentional in trying to target a fund balance that's be available for future opportunities that are listed there.
Back one slide, I was a little confused. You have an opening balance, and then you have these different revenues. But the 45, 360, 100 isn't the total of all of those items listed. The $630,600 isn't included in that. Why is that?
630 plus the 3.9 million below that should be the 4.5 million total revenue.
So the 630,000 is the total of the rental income, investment income, and refund of expenses.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. It's a sub, I got it.
That's a sub, yep.
Okay.
Thanks. And next one.
Other questions?
Sorry.
So as I mentioned, there is one new request this year. This is a program that we would like to explore with the council's approval. Essentially, in order to try to find ways to further support employees in this challenging housing market, we're looking at the idea of a stipend program. The stipend program would be there to try to assist employees that otherwise couldn't be afforded a unit in one of the only 74 units we currently have. Currently, the city has about 370 full-time FTE appropriated. So the idea would be that the pilot program would run to employees that are not otherwise benefiting in any sort of deed-restricted, discounted housing within the community. And we would basically use city wages to kind of be the determiner of eligibility. Right now, we're asking for a one-time appropriation of $600,000 to look into this. We have a meeting on November 18th to talk to you more about our city employee housing program, and we can bring more information at that meeting as well. The program likely wouldn't start until the middle of 2025 if you all supported this concept. We do think we still have some details to work out before we have a fully flushed program for you, though.
Any questions at this time? We do have a work session scheduled on this on the 18th. Any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
First thing, not exactly budget related, but could we have an update on the utilization of 72 municipal employee units, please? I think we got that last maybe about a year ago. This just triggered my memory that I'd love to see an update on how that's progressing, evolving. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Secondly, I find this pretty presumptuous to ask for this in budget as the first time we've ever heard this concept. I'm not opposed to the concept, but I don't think it's appropriate to ask for the spending authority before we've even discussed the schematic concept, let alone the details that you referenced, Pete. So I don't think it's appropriate to do this now. It could always be done in spring supplemental budget or fall supplemental budget. I think this is a bad precedent to earmark funds for conceptual programs that have not even been presented to us. Thanks.
Ward?
Yeah, Bill, I agree. Expenditures, individual expenditures have to be approved by city council if they're above $50,000, but to ask for $600,000, and we don't have any idea what it's for. I would prefer to put this on a supplemental request after we do a work session to tell us where we're doing, and further information has come in spring of 2025. So I don't really see why we put $600,000 into it at this point.
At the top here, it says supplemental request. Is this to be included, is the intention to include it in the budget or to come back with a supplemental request?
The $600,000 is in my recommendations to council for the 2025 budget. You know, one of the things is that I'm trying to evaluate the use of staff time. And so I need some indicator of what level of support there is before I spend what will be a significant time in designing a program. That's why we came forward with this approach. We did mention this on the opening day of budget as well. And so I haven't had any questions from that time to now, so I certainly welcome those that would assist in making future work sessions valuable. We thought it was important that we do check in, that this isn't a one and done for the council in these discussions. We have a lot of data we want to present you around affordability challenges from here to Glenwood. That is part of why this recommendation exists. We also have a reasonable amount of information around the number of city and full-time staff that are in subsidized housing and some capacity right now and those that are not, and a correlation to the wages those individuals make. So that's all information we had planned to start bringing to you in November, so that you're up to speed on those details related to this recommendation.
Yeah, I totally support studying this employee housing stipend program. I think most of us up here, maybe all of us, are just experiencing a little sticker shock. Yeah, there's no real details here. I definitely support the program, but that's where I stand.
All right, so council, if this is included in the 2025 budget that we are supposed to be reading and approving potentially on the 12th, This can be brought to us as a supplemental. We can approve the budget not on the 12th, but on the subsequent meeting. So how do we want to handle this between now and the work session?
Regular meeting, is that what you meant? Instead, you said work session.
Well, the work session is scheduled for the 18th.
I'm sorry, post-budget approval. I mean, I would not approve a budget with this in it.
Right.
So,
So you would request, pull this out of the 2025 budget. It's welcome to have the work session, and then we'll talk about it for a supplemental.
yep. I mean, the funds are not needed, as staff presented, the funds would not be needed till mid-25 anyways, so there's time to do this in the spring supplemental request, I believe.
Sam and then Ward?
Yeah, this seems like an order of operations thing. So Pete, if this is in the budget and then on the 18th, we decide we don't like it, it's not like the money's spent already, it can come out of the budget. So it's just a matter of when we do something, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly be told by council that you don't want us to proceed with this program, even if it is in the budget. I think that gives us direction that we would have to hold back. But in terms of trying to future plan for spending needs, if the council was to support it, we threw this in the budget for 2025.
But as far as like the repercussions go, we're talking about 6 days. It's in the budget, then 6 days later, we're like, actually, no thanks. It doesn't make that huge of a difference as far as planning goes, which I imagine is the whole reason for budgeting in the first place.
Yeah, it's certainly up to your discretion. You know, I'll have to message to our employee population, whatever council's choice is around this, so we'll respond to where you're at. We did provide in the supplemental that we're talking about 225 employees with loan payments twice a year between $1,200 and $3,000 is the high-level framework that we present in our budget. I present in the budget proposal. So I think one of the things that would be helpful is also to understand what additional information that you would want at this time in November to be able to let us know versus programmatic detail, which we plan to bring back in 2025.
Yeah, I'll tell you the things I'd be interested in with fairness and equity among the employees here. Because I always think the difficult thing with this is making it equitable for everyone. And then the other part is how it affects other employers in the valley as far as the private sector and others that don't have the ability to do a stipend program just because they're competing against us for that sort of thing. So that's the thing I'm interested in, but I'm okay keeping it in the budget for now, since days later we'll potentially take it out, reform it, whatever, so.
Thank you. Ward?
Yeah, I need some clarification, Tori. You mentioned we have a work session that we're going to get more details in November 2024. Were you suggesting the approval of the budget after that work session so we get an idea of, a better idea of what that 600K is for?
You know, I hate to pick on cats, but there's more than one way to skin it. And so whatever. What we heard was if we're going to hear the budget on the 12th, that this wouldn't be a supported item by one council member. We heard another council member say that it doesn't matter if it's in the budget or not. It feels maybe more comfortable approving it and then dealing with it at the work session. I was saying that this could be taken out of the budget and approved later at a supplemental time, or the budget can be approved. We want to get the budget approved before the end of November so that it is in effect for the 1st of January, et cetera. So there's many different ways you can go about it.
Well, to any feline friends that I may have, my sensitivity, I would prefer not to include this in the budget until we know what it's all about. Could certainly support spring supplemental for this.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Jim, any thoughts?
Again, I support it. I just wanted more details as to where that 600 grand is going,
Okay.
if that's enough.
But are you comfortable with the budget?
Yeah, he is saying leave it in and we'll deal with it. And I guess for me, if I'm breaking any ties, I'd say leave it in the budget. We'll deal with it on November 12th.
That works for me.
November 12th or the work session on November 18th?
November 12th, we'll decide if we want to keep it in the budget or not.
Okay. Sure.
So if I can ask, based on Sarah's statement too, is there any other feedback you'd like before the 12th that we can provide that direction and discussion?
For me, I mean, I'm looking forward to the work session, and I think that the information you're going to be bringing is going to be full and detailed. So I don't know that I have any additional questions, because I don't know what questions those would be until I am there. But I fully anticipate kind of a rollout of a long-term strategy with this as a starting point, perhaps. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Sorry, I want to apologize. I'm not sure if for discussion during the budget makes the most sense to me. I want the full holistic discussion to happen during the work session. So if that's the case, I'd rather take it out and then talk about the work session than don't go. I don't. This will be a good discussion on budget night. I think it'll be a good discussion when it's an item during a work session.
And we're happy to present now if you'd like us to.
Have it now to present?
We have substantial data we could present now.
I'm not talking about data. I'm talking about like the questions that like I have.
Well, we have answers to those because we've weighed those, and we think about, we have 74 units. Those employees are receiving a substantial, that a vast majority of the workforce does not receive, as well as who've been successful in the process versus those that haven't, and how it affects your ability for the council to provide essential services in the community. So I mean, this isn't a last minute thought. We've been working on this for a year as part of our strategic plan for housing for this vast force. So we know this in quite a bit of detail. And I have the person who can present the data and how we do the numbers here this evening, if that's what council would like.
I would suggest tonight's not the appropriate, and I'm certainly not accusing anyone of doing this at the last minute. I just would really like to hear that data and have an opportunity to process it thoughtfully and be ultimately, hopefully, be a big supporter of this initiative. I just don't like the way that it's being, the order of operations, to use Sam's term.
Understood. Is there an opportunity to have this work session on next Monday, if council members are available on November 4th, Monday? Currently, council, we don't have meetings scheduled for that work session day Monday, and we don't have them scheduled for the Tuesday of Election Day. Are members available for Monday? Well, you don't even have to answer now. Look, we've got it right here. We can give direction. I don't want to go into the presentation on this item right now because I don't know how long this work session is going to take us on everything else. We will come back to this. Again, there's many different ways to handle this. It's all good. Any further questions for right now? Okay. Any further requests for information at the work session that you haven't already shared? Okay. Is it possible to do this work session on Monday if council members are available?
Yeah.
I am not.
I'm
You're not-
looking for
you're
Liz to
not?
give me a nod. Yes.
But Bill's not available?
Bill's not available.
Again, I just don't know why we can't do this thoughtfully and hear about the program, hear about the data, and bring this back in the spring supplemental budget. I don't know why we're talking about adding a meeting to try to cram this in for no good reason.
Well, it's not just adding a meeting for this. It's about moving this meeting, but it's also that we have other items that are timely and that could be dealt with on Monday as well. So it could work into that. If you're not available, then that's 1/5 of us is not here. So we will figure it out, guys. We'll come back to this at the end. Let's keep moving through the presentation if you don't mind.
The remaining of the funding in the program is for capital maintenance for those 74 units as they turn over. As they age, we need to go in and do some work on those. And then we have some specific money just for a project we know of at East Main Street, so that's the total of that program.
Real quickly, just on this one item, capital improvements or capital maintenance and repairs and renovations, are those things that are initiated by the tenants or by us as property owners?
They are initiated by the city 95% of the time. There might be that a tenant or owner brings to attention an issue to the city staff that in review of their deed restriction, it would be a City of Aspen expense or project to manage.
Thank you. Question?
I think I asked this same question last year, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but is that 550,000, to be clear, to distinguish it from the second line, is that to be spent both on employee-owned units and rent units?
There are some pieces of ownership units that the city has responsibility for because they have them in spaces. And so there's aspects like roofs and sometimes centralized heating elements and things like that that we make sure function so that we don't have damage on those properties.
And there is components, particularly MEP systems, that generally completely live the length of the ownership and also extend beyond the capital maintenance provision of the deed restriction. And so the city has not had the position since the program was started in the 90s that to protect the asset and cities for the long term, that particularly like MEP system, major MEP systems would be the city's responsibility. And the deed restrictions are rich.
Deed restrictions specifically say things the city will pay for while the unit is owned by others?
There are certain items it lists that way. For some, because the deed restrictions date back all the way to 1994, they vary a bit. Some of them might be by a dollar amount rather than about the actual activity. But yeah, so for example, you expect a lifespan of 30 years on a pre-boiler system. You have to have someone stay in a unit for 30 years. So that's just the nature of the council's philosophy back then when they started the program, and that continued, that those major items like roofs, like MEP, windows that generally outlast ownership are at the city's expense for maintaining that resource available for the city in the future.
Thanks. Does everyone get that? Because that's solar capture program.
Yep, and it's how many are the rental and how many are the ownership?
So it's back and forth, but it's generally 50-50-ish.
Yeah.
And the key distinctions here is that no city of Aspen employee in their units. Very little incentive to make capital improvements, of which there's truly no way to regain it because there is no longevity past employment.
These would normally, in an APSHA program, be covered by the HOA fees and their cap reserves, is that correct? And that we don't, do we have HOA fees for the ownership units for the 505 fund?
Yes, HOA fees vary, and it depends on the units. We have some units that are in other complexes that we purchased into, and so they are subject to those own HOA fees. And then sometimes we have our own standalone, like Water Place or 550 Main, that have their own HOAs as well.
Yes, and those HOAs have, we would say, above base services that they are responsible for, and why they collect HOA fees for it.
Other questions? Slides, questions, thank you. Any other questions? None right now, thanks.
Great. Afternoon, we're going to talk about employee benefits for 2025. You ready?
More than.
My favorite topic. So for 2025, I want to take a moment and just, Ben has a self-funded health plan. So what does that mean? When someone who's on the plan goes to the doctor, who pays for the claims? The city. It's not a fully insured company, it's the city. So we don't have United or UMR, the city is paying for those claims. We do set up the infrastructure to be partially self-funded, and we hire companies to help us with our infrastructure. So if you've heard of Allegiance, they manage the claims for us. It's called a third-party administrator. We also have stop-loss policy, which is why we're partially self-funded. That manages our losses. It stops the bleeding or stops the losses in some cases. So it mitigates some risk. For 2025, our philosophy is to maintain an 85-15 split. For 2025, we're actually down to 83-17%. It's a philosophical approach for the city of Aspen. The employer's paying 85%. And the employee is paying 15% to 17% for a cost share model. If you have skin in the game, you're more apt to make diligent spending decisions. And again, it's a philosophical approach. We do maintain our competitiveness with our peers, even though healthcare is very expensive.
I'm just going to jump in there a little bit more on why are we a self-funded health plan is because it costs less. 95% of the time, because we are not paying exorbitant fees to third parties to manage the network and the claims at the same level as when we can directly do this. So as an example, Alyssa negotiates directly with healthcare providers on behalf of the city to set prices that are very favorable to our health plan, instead of hiring someone like a United Healthcare or someone to do that for us.
Thank you, Sarah. AVH, our hospitals are also self-funded. The school district is no longer self-funded, but a lot of large employers in the Valley are self-funded for the reasons that Sarah discussed. There's also a flexibility component because you can manage the plan design, create wellness programs as well. So employee benefit revenues for 2025, projected opening fund balance is 7.7 million, and roughly 8 million is coming into the plan as a revenue. With the majority, you're seeing our employer premiums here. And again, it's maintaining that 85-15% split. And as Sarah mentioned, you're really not seeing the exorbitant administrative of fees and costs that you would see with a fully insured company. So on the expenditure side, we're proposing 8.7 million in expenditures as the authority proposed. This increases stop-loss coverage by around 50% within the expenditure for 2020-25. However, recently we did receive bids that beat this thankfully. I will tell you every year when we rebid stop-loss, I'm fairly anxious because that's, as you're seeing here, those fees can increase substantially. And this past year, still continuing, has been very challenging, one of our most challenging years that since I've worked here for the city in my 20 years of employment. We're relating that to some COVID, kind of pent-up people postponing surgeries or medical procedures and whatnot, just inflation in general as well. And honestly, health insurance is cyclical. So you have good years and bad years. This year's a bad year.
Question?
Thanks, Alyssa. A couple of questions. One, is the claims paid figure under expenses the maximum outlay based on the stop-loss policy that you have in place?
Good.
Sorry, it is not for 2025 at this time. To be seeing a fall supplemental for us because claims have been running hot, as Alyssa mentioned. We are going to request the authority to go up to the full kind of out-of-pocket max that we anticipate. We're hoping still beat it, but at this point we are running quite hot. I anticipate that we actually will. So, this number is below that number at this time.
By what kind of margin?
Oh, maybe $500,000.
And you're budgeting under that amount?
And because there is potential that we can have cyclical patterns, and we will do check-ins spring and fall to say how are we trending and do we need to make adjustments. So we're kind of keeping the spending authority at the council level until we need to request that.
And to further answer your question too, because we're placing currently mitigating in place to manage our plan. So as Sarah mentioned, we're negotiating contracts, kind of one-off contracts outside your in-network contracts with hospitals in the Valley. It's important to keep care local if we can. If not, there's other telework or telehealth options and whatnot too. But with some of these mitigating factors, we're going to see the implications with our fund balance and what our fund looks like. So we're also increasing our deductibles. We're managing our plan design with that intent too, to manage our plan, making some prescription changes too. So all those changes are mitigating factors for our budget. And it's hard to really anticipate, put a numerical value on the savings for some of these changes with prescription and whatnot. So we'll see. It's kind of, we have kind of a targeted goal with what we're trying to achieve. We're within that range, and it being cyclical too. We think that we're using a pretty consistent formula for where we need to be for claims paid.
Okay, great. And so my question, you partially touched on, but most insurance programs have negotiated prices for certain services, right? With, particularly in a place like this where we only have a limited number of providers. Are we able to do similar things, and are we doing that?
100%. We have network providers and services that we do have. And then above and beyond that would be those one-off contracts that I mentioned.
And then over the last 10 years or so, how often has our reinsurance stop-loss policy kicked in? You know, is that a worthwhile premium over the long term? Not on a anomaly year, but over the long term, is that a worthwhile premium?
So we were denied by 6 other carriers, to put that into perspective. We have some high individual claimants, and there's a lot of, yes, it's a competitive premium. We're not renewing with the same company. So as we mentioned, we're having a really challenging health plan utilization year. We have 15 claimants driving a large percentage, I have it in here, over 40% of our overall costs. So very high, usually with those that hit the individual stop-loss number, which is at 150 right now, so you have individual and aggregate coverage. You project 2 to 3 claimants. This year, we're significantly higher. So it is a competitive bid, to answer your question.
Got it. So the stop-loss policy, there's individual employees get over a certain point, that insurance kicks in, and then there's an aggregate for all of our employees.
Yep. And
Yeah,
we
it-
anticipate about $1 million back this year at a minimum at this point.
Which is
Got
why
it.
our
I saw
current,
that on the revenue side. Okay.
our current carrier's bid did not come in as advantageous.
Thanks.
Ward, then Sam?
What kind of increase have we seen in our expenses projected in 2025 over 2024? I think from other perspectives, we've seen roughly a 25% increase.
So in terms of the claims number, this is actually slightly below what our 2024 out-of-pocket is probably going to wind up being. So as Melissa mentioned, we're having a super hot year, so I anticipate to fully hit our cap. This does not reach the cap on next year at this point, so it's not above 2024's projection.
We did receive a report from our broker today. As of today, we're at 87% of aggregate. So in my career, my 20-plus years in managing health plans, self-funded health plans, we've never come this close to hitting aggregate.
And Pete, this is on the previous slide of revenues. This is a silly question, but is there actually investment income losses, or is it not just zero because there is no investment?
Yeah, so you can see on the next slide that right now we have the fund going negative in those out years. We obviously will never let that happen, but that's what's driving basically the negative income in the subsequent years, is we're starting with a negative opening balance in the formulaic long-range plan.
So it's a formula thing, it's not actually.
Correct.
So
We won't
they
finish.
should be zero.
Well, I will tell you, technically, we actually can post negative income numbers because you can have unrealized losses that
Understood on that,
you
but-
have to show. Yeah,
I was wondering if you had any money to invest at a certain point, why would there be any losses? And that's why I thought that was
that's strictly on the act of the formulaic drive of the spreadsheet.
a very small amount, but thank you.
Other questions? Next slide. Question slide.
Questions?
I don't really have a question here. I find this stuff fascinating and difficult to understand sometimes. I have nothing really to compare this to. And I'd love more information. I don't know what other municipalities or like organizations of our size, I don't know what they do. I'd be interested in data points like you were just sharing that small number of claimants driving high percentage of claims. I'd be interested in some of that data. I'm not really asking for it for others, but just for myself. So, Alyssa, I wouldn't mind, spending 30 minutes with you just to talk about this program. I am completely supportive of, even in the face of challenging insurance times, I'm completely supportive of as much health support that we can give to our staff and employees as we can. I think it's just it's something that's really risen to people's consciousness over just mostly a recent past, and it's just fascinating that there's been such a premium placed on individual health care, and then when it goes to the market and the impacts that it has on providing that, it's just fascinating. So I would love to learn more about this, but I am in support of moving forward with what we need to do for kind of healthcare for our staff and stuff.
Great.
Did you have a hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question on the prime example in the Valley is school district just had a massive loss because, correct?
Because of healthcare costs and
Yeah.
managing their self-funded plan,
They were
my
to
understanding.
something else. So this is that's the type of situation you're trying to avoid, obviously, especially as you explore all the plan. I don't know their situation fully, but obviously it comes down to budgeting for worst case scenario and making sure you don't dip to the general fund too far. And that's these are statements, but that's your goal ultimately, is to not end up like them.
Well, our goal is to have a sustainable health plan, and that's that 80-15 philosophical approach to making sure that, again, is partially self-funded. So I'm not certain what if theirs was fully self-funded.
that's the
That's part of why we have some stop-loss insurance and so these other really proactive mitigating factors. You know, I didn't mention it, but one piece that is really innovative is we're actually looking at international prescription costs and prescription utilization for January 1st. So we can't do that as a city, but you as an individual can, and there's some significant cost savings there. So we're really being proactive and creative for our solutions.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I bring it up because a smart person learns from their own mistakes, but a wise person learns from someone else's mistakes. So, yeah, close example.
What happens if you do that?
I have times.
Benefits?
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I thought you were doing it.
All right, I guess I'll present on the Tourism Promotion Fund. So both revenues flowing in and this is going out. This is a pass-through program, essentially. We collect a 2% lodging tax, and that is split 25-75 between the Transportation Fund and the Tourism Promotion Fund. So all the money then goes out the door on the 75% to our partner that provides these services. That would be ACRA. Council recently did adopt a new resolution that kind of worked into where some funding would exist for certain programs and where that money should come out of. So you should obviously know that with this, and I think, is it on this slide or not, that the X Games funding has been shifted over to ACRA and would be basically supported out of these dollars.
Yep, Bill.
Curious where the 382, 321 number comes from and why you keep that as your static fund balance.
So the targeted balance for a reserve was 300K. The extra 82, I'd have to do a little bit of research. I think we've built up a little bit over some timing differences, but and some investment income obviously returned. So that's the small extra balance.
And there's a process we use in supplemental to release those funds to ACRA. We just don't show it here because we'll deal with that in a supplemental process when we know it's fully actualized.
Is there a sunset date for this tax?
There's not.
That's not legal in Colorado anymore, right? You can't pass a tax that does not have a sunset date, or
No, you
can
can still do that.
You can still do that. Thanks.
An example is the last Parks Fund tax. The community supported it being a perpetual with no sunset.
Did we receive a destination management update info only?
Yes, you did. It was prepared by Eliza Voss, so she's been submitting that information regularly to council under the terms of the new destination marketing agreement.
Do you have any recollection of what month that came in to us?
Comes in quarterly. We can go pull them for you if you would like.
Well, I have one from December or August, sorry.
August, the last one I see.
And I see the report. I guess, Debbie, since you're here, can I just ask you a question? Do you mind coming up to the table? Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
My question is just about allocation, and I don't, in the report that I have, I don't have kind of how it splits out. Give us a destination marketing and management plan and on an annual basis that kind of delineates what gets spent where.
Right.
So you will appropriate the number for us, which is up on the screen. From there, we take the large number and we budget it. So in November, at our November board meeting, we have the Tourism Outlook Forum, and we also have the budget. Prior to that, we have our finance committee that's looking at it, the marketing advisory. So you guys, we get it to the board for approval end of November. Usually in January, we set a session with you, and then we go through the entire year's budget and give you the recap of the following year, or the prior year.
That sounds great. The only reason I ask is because, it shows up on these line items, marketing, tourism, promotion, and we've talked over the last several years about destination management, not so much marketing. And so I just wanted to, maybe for the update in January, is just to learn more and share with the community more about how these dollars are being spent.
Great, we would love that opportunity. So we'll work with Sarah to get on your calendar.
Be great. Awesome. Any other questions?
But I don't see, but you're saying that the X Games is coming on tourism promotion fund.
List. So what city council was that, in conversations earlier, that would not be general fund expense. You have not given me final direction, but I believe in my reading of that conversation and when we discussed it in city council's budget on our first night was that there was support that any City of Aspen tax dollar support for X Games really should be coming from this particular fund, given the nature of the evolution of games over the last 20 years. And that we are, by that, then are entrusting our vendor to handle the negotiations with CoA on that dollar amount. And I can tell you there are some good negotiations going on, and I don't believe it's finalized either to be able to share what that number ultimately is from these dollars. But that would be the intention, is that it is up to your destination marketing to decide the value of those media impressions and put a dollar contribution to it.
And I think you guys remember as well, the Destination Marketing Fund was 65 X Games. So now they've requested an additional 37, and that's what we're analyzing right now, is if that makes the most amount of sense to give that type of a contribution, especially since we're working on the management and the sustainability pieces of the Destination Management Plan.
So this is a negotiation with the CoA and ACRA?
Correct.
Thank you.
ACRA, or more specifically, the destination marketing team?
I would say the Executive Committee of ACRA, which is board members.
And the funding, though, source is the destination funds, so.
Correct.
That's a salient number.
And, yeah, I was just making the team that handles the destination marketing funds and ACRA.
Correct. It's Debbie, who handles the destination, and SKICO, along with some board members and Eliza. Nobody on the member side, just the DM side. It's up to me, because I sit on the chamber side of the equation.
Yeah, Debbie, thanks for being here. Nice to see you.
Sure, nice to see you.
Have you heard back from this table about X Games? Has it been conveyed to you?
Yes, which is why our
Are
negotiations.
there any questions on that?
No, I think
You
it's,
want further?
right in what we're thinking as well, so I think we're close. But I did listen in to your question.
Great.
Any other questions? Thanks. Next slide.
I'll see you tomorrow at the Zoom meeting, 8:30. The board meets tomorrow.
Only see you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. Great, thanks.
All right, education and the next few funds will be presenting. Public Education Fund, similar to the tourism promotion, is also a pass-through fund of the 0.3% tax. I will note to council the kind of in italics bold bullet point, there is a sunset on this at the end of '26, and council will need to initiate any future action if we would want to potentially renew that tax.
And to clarify that the request needs to come from the School District Board of Education to you in a formal process, and that's been reviewed with the current superintendent.
The only other item I'll point out is that these funds that are distributed to the school district are separate from the city tobacco tax funding that we have approved.
Yep, Bill?
Does this go directly to Aspen School District? The whole check?
No, it does not. It goes to the Aspen Education Fund.
Yeah. Sarah, when we've had conversations about some funding, potential funding for their theater, thought you said we couldn't fund a pass-through entity like AEF.
So this is an intergovernmental agreement, not a grant. And the way there is a tax question for this specific purpose voted on by voters, it's not an action of the council, it is an action of the voters that you're completing here. The council's role is to choose whether to honor the request to place the ballot question, and that's really where it stops for council, is that, and then the appropriations for the passing of the funds.
Our future role is that.
That's your current role. Yeah, so this tax was renewed in 2021, and the council at that time accepted a request from the school district, the school district board to place the question on the ballot. They agreed to support it 5-0, and so that occurred within the city limits to continue it. And there's an intergovernmental agreement that, just similar to how we have a destination marketing agreement, that directs where those funds are placed and how they are utilized.
Okay, but it pertains to budget. Our role here is pretty limited because we're following the term IGA.
And more importantly, the vote.
Right, thank you.
It's been requested?
At this point, there's not been a renewal request.
That's, all right, that's what I thought you said, but I wasn't sure. So at this point, we're sitting on our hands waiting for that.
Well, you really can't act without them acting first.
Yeah, that's
So it really is district to take leadership in that. And again, and I met with the new superintendent this summer to go over the process, because there's a little confusion thinking that they a ballot question, which is not accurate, only because it is the municipal sales tax authority. Only the municipality can set the ballot question.
Do you know if they're going to talk about it?
I can't speak to what their plans are. I think they're trying to sort out a lot of things right now on the financials, and needing to do some hard looks at their current spending, operating spending, right now.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was, excuse me, sir, ballot question in 2021?
It was either it might have been in 2020. It was during COVID. I'm sorry, I think maybe it was in 2020 for starting in 2021. We can go back though and look at the exact dates, whether it was 2020 or 2021.
I'd really be interested in seeing what the use, what the limits are and bounds are for the use of those funds.
Also, apologies because board asked, but it's only a 5-year sunset?
That is their request at the school
what they've
district. That comes in their letter, term, length of time does. I would caution the council from ever doing this as a perpetual question, because it is the municipality's taxing authority, which has some saturation points to it, and so you need the ability to review that each time with requests that comes forward. I'd also say there continues to be some significant changes in the spending landscape in the state that need regular review to ensure that this is in the best interest of our school district and students. And so the review process lets that happen. So for example, as you increase local funding, is it decreasing state funding? Those kinds of trade-offs that the school district is has the specialty skills to analyze that and what tax rate they may wish to request. And they also need to evaluate property taxes, particularly mill levies for bonding compared to operating revenues.
Just for educational purposes then, is this one of the most unique taxes to only have? I feel like most of ours are 20-plus years. Is there other examples that you can think off the top of your
Five's
head?
actually pretty common in municipalities across the country.
It is. Okay. Any others that are that short right now?
In the city, no. The only other ones that we have are 1-year terms.
But at the county level, for example, you have property taxes that some have been that way. I think we just changed in the last vote, the Health and Human Services, Healthy Funds, Healthy Communities Fund, just switched from 5 to 10 years, if I recall, the last vote on it. So that's really, each political body's decision to make about that, that situation.
Got it. Thank you.
And I don't know whether this or not, but some history around it will be extremely helpful. There was a reason that it was discussed in 2012, depending on the financial situation at that time, I think was what was begging for the potential of this tax increase. Since then, there have been other mechanisms and other taxing that has been at the table for the school districts. So, there's reasons behind the short lifespan of this one, but if we get to talk about it again, then that history will be helpful.
I'd encourage this to be a topic for joint meeting with the school board, quite honestly. I think that if you are going to contemplate placing a question again, it's to ask how were the funds already collected, utilized, with some specificity.
Thank you.
Up next, IT. Plan 2025 total sources of 3.1 million versus total uses of 3.4. We talked in detail on the kickoff meeting about software supplemental requests, increased network services, and just the cost of some of our cloud-based software packages, in addition to software application management. They have capital in 2025, including fiber optic improvements, CommVault backup upgrade, network services, and investment in cybersecurity.
Yep, Bill?
My only question is, are we done with the relocation project from the Armory to, I think it's here?
Yeah.
No, it is not done.
And how do we feel about the
We're
capital
fine on the
planning?
timing of it.
What's that?
We feel good about the timing of it. I
And
mean, it's
how-
in progress, but you asked if it
about
was
the budget
completed,
on
and
it?
it's not completed. I think right now, I feel good with the budget. I feel like the biggest hurdle was just meeting some of the additional conditioning in the base, which you funded in this year's budget, which made a big step forward. We still have a more detailed planning that needs to happen, in my opinion, before we completely pull the trigger on the relocation of that data center. We'll come back with you in supplemental if this doesn't do it. But the amount of detail I have right now, this is the amount I would recommend for funding.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional IT questions?
I don't know, you have another slide?
Not on IT. Up next, Kids First Fund, Plan 2025 revenues, 4.7 versus total uses of 3.8. They do have supplemental requests, including some additional dollars towards their workforce training and incentive programs, their VIP program, that helps support their partner programs, as well as some additional utility operating expense increases for the yellow brick building. Capital-wise, they do plan to replace some playground equipment at the yellow brick, and then some capital maintenance interior and exterior.
I don't know if they can speak to this since they're sitting in the back, but is this the total uses, is this everything you wanted, or is really the question I have, since you still have almost $1 million in a gap there, and I know there's a huge child care crisis in the valley. So.
Certainly welcome them to come up if they'd like to speak, but all the requests were granted in this budget.
Yeah, okay, so if they wanted more, they could have asked for more. Really, the
Right, so the staff at Kids First agree in continuing our address if we need to construct a new facility in the future. And so they've been comfortable putting these resources in that way, and it's why council has split the affordable housing and child care tax the way it is, at 90% going to the kids fund. So it's been a policy of council to be building up savings in this particular fund for the eventual construction project.
Okay, just want to hear about that long thing. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and finally, debt service fund. Planned debt payments for 2025, $6.3 million. Outstanding debt as of January 1st will be $46.5 million, the bulk of which is for the APD building and City Hall. And the only other thing I'll kind of point out, it's not reflected in the slide, but Parks does have a 2013 bond rolling off in 2025, and that is reflected, excuse me, in both the debt service LRP and the Parks LRP.
What's LRP?
Long-range plan, the forecast.
Thank you.
One, I think, one of the most important things on this slide is seeing that we have $46.5 million of outstanding debt forecasted on January 1st. Based upon standards, we have the ability to carry up to $600 million under best practices. Just not the philosophy this community's used to be heavy on the debt issuance side. But I just want to make sure you understand that there's a lot of capacity there, and by design of many councils, the intention has been never to pursue GO debt to that extent.
Are there opportunities for savings on paying early?
So you can call some of your debt. Two of those issuances you weren't able to call for a while yet. Both the new City Hall and the APD have to go through a first 10 years before you can actually call any of the debt. That's the structure we set up. The Castle Creek Energy Center balance will actually be paid off after the end of 25. So it's not worth advancing because it will be paid off next year. And for Parks and Open Space, Matt said that the 2013 issuance will roll off. There is also a 24 issuance that'll roll off. So Parks, I believe, only has one debt issuance still outstanding after 25. You could pay it off and you could alleviate some interest on that, but you also have to weigh that against your spending needs year over year.
So not much opportunity. Bill?
Do we know our blended interest rate across the portfolio?
I could not tell you that off the top of my head. Like I said, most of these are rolling off. When we did enter both New City Hall and APD, it was at a very low interest rate environment, so we got very advantageous rates for both of those.
Those are fixed through the term?
They are. I mean, yes, they're sometimes slightly. But they're.
Be curious to know.
We do have that information for you. I think it's actually in your book on the pages. There's specific pages for each issuance, and it should have the information for you.
Great, thanks.
Just some housekeeping. There are a few items we've discussed previously, and I want to make sure that they're all reflected on the slide. Changes between the proposed budget and what we will bring back for adopted budget. So the first item was a budget team oversight. We netted out those 2 seasonal positions that engineering's planning to give up for their requested supplemental for the construction mitigation officer. We took them out of both the base ongoing and then also put a negative in the supplemental item. So we double reduced it. So that is just returning some of their base budget back to them as that first item. That's budget team.
So Sam, your question was very valid, and we went back to look at it, and we made a mistake on the administration's proposal. Because originally it was $28,000 as the delta, and the true delta, should council want to fund that as full-time, is $82,000.
Very nice.
The next item in police department presentation, that was just late information on the Regional Communication Center operating needs for 2025. So that net 57 was included on their slide, and the full ask is 100,000 for 2025. Food tax refund, I mentioned earlier tonight. Removal of X Games funding out of the general fund, we discussed on kickoff night and then briefly tonight as well. So that was still baked in the proposed budget, and we'll remove that. And then finally, the removal of the Meralt Bike Skills Trail project out of parks. All of those added together, it's about a net reduction of $42,000. So the net appropriations number, when it's rounded, does not move. And then finally, on the revenue side, we applied for a grant for the Cozy Point Archery Range. The number that was built into the revenue side for the incoming grant was a little higher than the actual awarded grant. So that's just a true up of the actual grant funds we anticipate to receive in 2025.
Ward, did you have a question there?
My question was on an issue that was brought to our attention earlier today about funding for homeless. If that, you see that in the budget somewhere. A specific request from the county.
There is not, I believe you're speaking about $25,000. And I spoke about this earlier today, and my understanding is he had conversation with multiple of you related to it. It is not in the recommended 2025 budget. The direction I received from council was to focus with the committee on a long-term strategy, both assessment and strategy for supporting the needs of individuals who are housed or need transitional housing. The county is currently undertaking that process now. I met with the consultants in early October. Chief Ferber met with them in September. And so we're waiting that information to come back so that you have some clarity around the funding, the purposes of the funding requests. At this point, I can't provide you any more detail because the request has not changed since it was initially made back. So if you remember how we got here is that the city of Aspen, through the grants process, was funding Aspen Homeless Shelter $25,000 a year. The shelter competed for that funding against the other health and human services nonprofits. When that nonprofit went away, in a rather urgent situation, the county reached out and said funding. We agreed to fund at our existing level, $25,000 in that emergency year, pending a strategy on supporting this population, rather than the city being an ongoing provider of operating costs. Some of the reasons you gave me for that included that it wasn't a competitive process, and so more and more of the health and service dollars are being taken away from nonprofit into intergovernmental agreements. Also, that you wanted that strategy, and third, that the county has a dedicated property tax specifically for providing these kinds of services, whereas you have to contemplate it in terms of other general fund allocations. So without the strategy, you wanted additional information to be able to support a general fund request in order to be able to explain to nonprofit why you're saying either getting reduced funding or why that's to get funded under an IGA versus other services. Because the funding does then transfer to a nonprofit, just to have some clarity here. It's not the county as a service provider.
Yes, a 25K was not a specific ask from the county for a specific dedicated use?
The request was pretty limited when it came to me. It was presented a staff member at the county of, will you just keep funding this? And given the nature under which the conversation occurred about providing emergency funding when the nonprofit closed, I said that would need to be a more formal request. You had, as council, has had multiple conversations on this topic, expecting a better, more comprehensive approach. So I just disagree that the county's without resources for this particular purpose until they're able to present a more comprehensive plan that you've requested.
Speaking for myself, I'm open to helping fund homelessness benefit, but not without a specific ask from the county with a specific spending direction. So some vague $25,000 we're not giving, to me, I think that is not a true representation of our of my own beliefs and values as a representative of the housing community. If we had a specific $25,000 request from the county with a justification, I would certainly entertain it. I think we're lacking that.
I would just add that request can also come directly from the nonprofit through your grant process to compete, just as you always required all these many important services in our community compete for the funding that's available. So that is an option for the vendor as well at this point.
I had a conversation with a few of you regarding this because there was an inquiry that was today. What would council members like next for this? Is there a desire to hear a request from the county if they want to come to us about this? I have made that request from the chair a couple months ago. I haven't heard back, so do you want me to circle back and let them know that that's the...
Where are we in the grant process? Is there still time to make a request in the grant process?
Yes, I think the grant process, is it open now or does it open next week? It's currently open. Yeah, so it's open right now.
Yeah, without a specific request, when one was actually asked for, I think that they should be informed that if they have a specific request to go through the grant process.
I agree.
Thank you. Sam or John? John?
Yeah, I fully support this. I think this is a relatively small amount of money we're talking about in the grand scheme of things, and I'd just like to see a formal proposal.
Yes, they can ask for it through the grant process is fine.
Or avail them to whatever direction they want to take.
Yeah, as long as they're asking formally and we get to review it, that's
Great.
all I care about.
Okay. All right. I can convey that. Other questions? You have a summary slide for you on some of the items that were for further discussion. As I said, we have an outstanding item from tonight, which has to do with the housing funds. And so to handle that, I mean, I guess my suggestion or probably preference here is that I would leave the housing in. I could see us continuing budget from November 12th to our next regularly scheduled meeting for final adoption. After the work session, that gives us more clarity about that housing dollar line item. that's what I can see happening. There's other ways to go about this. I heard from 3 of you, I believe, that you would like this taken out of the budget. Right? Sam, Bill, Ward?
That part doesn't matter to me as much. Whatever gets us to having the work session on November 18th is what I care about. Again, it seems like order of operations, because I think ultimately there's probably support for this item. It's just, I don't think we can have a productive conversation at the budget meeting on the 12th. I think it should be its own work session. So whatever gets us to November 18th work session, whether it's in or out, that part doesn't matter to me.
Ward?
We have a work session scheduled for the 11th. I think that be shoehorned into that work session, so we'd have information on it prior to our resolution for budget on the 12th.
11th. What is scheduled for the 11th time?
Scheduled for the 11th at this time is a hire that was requested to be rescheduled because the county office is closed that day. And so the county staff requested to not need to appear on the day the services are closed. So the item we do have scheduled that night is you'll be meeting with the pollster for the polling you requested regarding the entrance to Aspen. Just a friendly reminder, as I'd shared with council earlier, I am out of the office that day and I am not available for that work session.
Can we have the 7th? Can we have the work session, that
Really,
item?
That's your choice, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
I'm okay with it.
yes, yes.
Whatever the quickest way we can get to the bottom of this is.
Good suggestion, Ward.
That'd be great.
So the presentation we had planned for the 18th is more than just this project. It is, or this pilot program. It is the entire strategy of housing and a strategy that has been well informed by our employees. And you will see one of the driving requests for them is consideration of a stipend program in there. And so we'll bring that information, or I would say representatives on having that information forward.
That'd be great.
Either double up or switch them. Whatever works.
Yep. That'd be great. We'd love to see that presentation on the 11th instead of the 18th. Any other questions here? Items that are not delineated? Again, there you go. What I was gonna say, for the circle.
So clarification, on the 12th is a budget resolution approval, but the ordinance for the tax items that are included is reading and approval on the 19th. But a public hearing on the resolution, which is,
There would be a public hearing for the budget, which is on the 12th. But yes, other items need to be heard and approved by ordinance.
What are those other items?
Fee ordinance, the
Fall supplemental.
fall, well, yeah, but that's unrelated to wrapping up the 25 budget.
Utility.
Yeah, and utility fees. So this is one of those things about the city charter, that the budget is heard and typically adopted in one meeting. It does not require 2 readings. And however, changes to the budget and changes to code, such as the fees, do require first, second reading with public hearing and second reading plus 30 days for implementation.
And I think historically, we've probably done budget by ordinance.
No,
No,
always done it by
we've only adopted
2
budgets by
hearings?
no,
just one.
no. We have to do it this very specific way because of the way the charter's written.
I thought I'd remember doing a two hearing process for budget in the past, but. Any other questions? Seeing none. Got one more slide for us?
Nope, that is it.
that's it, page 24.
So for clarity, given the timing of packets, the packet will go forward with only the changes that were the previous slide. 600,000 will still be in it because we have to issue that packet to meet your expectations by close of business on that Thursday before the 12th.
Okay. Awesome, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sam, do you have attribution for your quote on Wise Man, Smart Man? I love that. Yeah. Okay.
You want to sign a charter amendment petition for the 50 to 60% threshold?
No, I'm not gonna sign it.